All right, welcome to Module 3, where I will be discussing assessing data sources with DBA Express. There are three different sections that I'm going to talk about here. First, I'll talk about using Data Space Analyzer to assess storage space, and then also using the object browser to analyze your source metadata, and then we'll talk about doing some data profiling with Data Surf. So first you have the Data Space Analyzer. Now this tool is going to provide information on how space is used. You can see space used by total file size, allocated space, unallocated space, page type size, row count, and type summary. And as you can see from the screenshot that we provide here, it does show it to you in a chart. And it actually have different options as far as how you want to visualize that data. So just some notes on usage for the Space Analyzer. First off, you start with the primary file group, and then you can drill down through the tables and then down to the index level. You do have different visualization options, as I mentioned. Data can be displayed in different styles of charts. You have a pie chart, torus, or a bar chart. Details will always be displayed down towards the bottom underneath those charts. And also exporting. The information that you view inside of the Space Analyzer can be exported to CSV files. Then we have the object browser. Now this is great for examining objects inside of a database. You can view all the items within the database, so tables, views, stored procedures, anything in there. You can drill down into the tables, you can see the columns and all of their data types. And it gives you instant access to object definitions. So this is a great tool to use if you need to script out a table or a stored procedure, something that you need to recreate per se in a development environment. You can easily grab the scripts from the production version with the object browser. And then we have Data Surf. Now, Data Surf is a tool that's going to let you view cross-table relationships. So you basically start with a row in a table, and then you can track related rows across the other tables. You also have some highlighting options, so you can change nodes into different colors, kind of so you can mark exactly where in the environment you've been. And you can create a diagram that shows how all of these different tables are linked by, say, one row of data. All right, so how about we go and check out a demo. We will see exactly how to use these features to assess the environment with DBA Express.
In this demonstration, we are going to look at some of the features of DBA Express and get a good look at how you would use those features to assess your environment. We'll also take a look at the interface and just go over some generalities about using these different features and how to access them. So in front of me, I have the Pragmatic Workbench. And the Pragmatic Workbench is an interface really that centralizes all the different features of our products. So inside of this workbench, you'll find all the features of BI Express, DBA Express, and Doc Express. Fortunately, right up here in the corner, we have what we call the Feature Finder. And in this Feature Finder, you can filter out these different features and look at only what you're interested in. So I could look at just the features by the technology that they're applied to, or by product, or by role. So for this example, I'm just going to filter by product. It's easier for me in this case. And I'm going to look only at the DBA Express features. So here we have all of our DBA Express features, and we're going to look at a few of these and talk about how they would be used to kind of assess your environment. So let's say you're going into an environment you've never been in, like say you're a consultant, and you're just looking at some source data that you're going to have to do something with. And you need to get an idea of what you have and as much information about it as possible. So the first thing we're going to look at is the Data Space Analyzer. Now, a Data Space Analyzer is a tool that helps the DBA look at how much space a database is taking up. When I launch this from the workbench, it's going to ask for the server and the database. So all of these examples that I'm doing here on my workstation are all pointing to a default installation of SQL Server. So I'm just looking at my local host. And for the database, I have this PW insurance database that we're going to look at. So just a database full of insurance data. And the first thing it's going to show you is the primary file group. And it gives you a view, like a graph that you can look at, or a chart that you can look at, that represents the total size. You can see right here the total size of the file group. And if I hover the mouse over that chart, it gives me details about that file group and a callout window. Now all of this information that it's showing here in the callout is also displayed down below in a grid view. And there are different ways of looking at this information as far as how it's represented visually. You have this torus chart. Up in the corner, you also have the option of a pie chart and a bar chart. So it's really whatever you prefer, however you prefer to view this information. Now, if I want to go further into this and get more details about this database, all I have to do is click on the chart. And that takes it down to the table level. So now I can see how much data is being consumed by the tables. And again, I can just hover the mouse over the different part of the chart that I'm interested in and see the details about each table in this callout window. Or down below, all of it is shown in a grid view. Now, some of the things that you're going to see here, really just some basic information such as the name of the table, the type of object it is you're looking at, how much space has been allocated. One very handy thing is the overflow/LOB. So you can get that information and how many rows are in each table. If I click on any one of these tables, like we'll just take this claims table, it takes you down to the index level. Now, these tables seem to have only just one index per table, but you could see, say, multiple indexes if they existed. And again, just hovering the mouse over the chart, I can see all the details about them. And also down here displayed in the grid view. And you can view information like this in different ways, such as different ways that your database is taking up space. Up at the top, when I select Jump To, you can see different ways of looking at this, such as like total file size, total allocated space, unallocated, page type size, row counts, and type summary. So different ways that you can view how much space the database is taking. You can also export all of this data. So if I'm looking at all of these tables and I want to export the information that I see down here, up at the top I can just choose to export the data, and it exports it into a CSV file. All right, so I'm going to close out of the Data Space Analyzer. And also one thing too that's good to mention, up at the top you'll notice as we open up these different features, you have these tabs. So I could go back to the main workbench and open up a different feature for a different tab and kind of jump between the different tabs that I have. In this case though, I just want to close it out. I don't really need it anymore. So now we have some information on what type of space is being used up. So now I want to see the different objects that are inside of that database. So I want to go into the tables and see what we have, into the database itself and see what tables are there, triggers, functions, stored procedures, things like that. So for that, I'm going to use the object browser. Now with the object browser, again, you're just selecting a server and pointing to a database. And I'm going to use that PW insurance database again. This is going to show all of the objects inside that database in a tree view. So here we have it all organized, tables, views, all your stored procedures here in the programmability folder. Everything inside that database is all displayed in this expandable view. Now, if I want to look at a table, let's expand that out. I have a list of all of the tables. And if I hover the mouse over a table, it shows me another callout window with all of the column names and the details about those columns. So I can see the data types, if they can hold nulls or not. And if I select one of these, such as this customer table, then over to the right, it displays all the information about that table. I can see the columns, the constraints, indexes, and towards the bottom, the script. So I can get all of these different scripts from the object browser. And I can drill into these different objects as well. So over to the left, I have the option of expanding that table to see its columns, constraints, indexes, and triggers. So I can do it that way. Or when I'm looking at it over here on the right side of the screen, and I say I want information on maybe an index, I can just double click it and it just jumps right to that object. And you can also look at views, which would be very helpful in this case. So I can see 3 different views, and again, hovering the mouse over the view gives me a list of all the columns that are being used. So I can take a look at the view just by clicking it. It shows me all of the columns, and down below I have the script, so I can see where all these columns are coming from. The object browser really just gives you a very simple, concise interface that I can use to look at all the different objects that we have inside the database. Get a feel for what type of tables are here, what kind of columns are in those tables. So just to give you, and of course to give you scripts to recreate these objects if needed. So now I want to see how all of these different objects are related. And to do that, close out of here. I'm going to use the Schema Surf feature. Schema Surf is going to show you how all of the objects inside of the database are related. So all the tables, stored procedures, anything that's inside the database, how it's linked. Provide the name of the server again, and choose PW Insurance. The interface here is similar to the object browser. You have a listing of all the objects over here to the left. When I expand the tables, I'll just choose a particular table. So we could look at something such as maybe a people.customer and see how this is related. Now it shows you the people.customer table right here in the center of the diagram, and I can see everything around it. Let's just zoom in just by scrolling the mouse. And I can see we have a foreign key relationship right here to the people.company table. It's also going to show you the schema relationships. So here are the schema dependency. So we have basically showing that this table is in the people schema. And this little lightning bolt represents an executable dependency. And in this case, it's a view. So you would see this with stored procedures, views, and triggers. So I can see what this table is related to. These 3 different views that we have here, and looks like we have 3 different tables. It does show a representation of the primary key constraint, and then also the schema. And I can use this diagram to kind of surf, if you will, through the environment. So I want to see what's related to this people.detail table. So if I select that, it changes the focus to that detail table. And now I can see all the immediate relationships to this table. Now, you do have some options as far as changing colors if you need to mark certain objects inside of your diagram. So for example, I can right-click on this detail table, and in that menu, I have some options around color. So I can change the node, this actual node that I selected. I could change the node and immediate referencing dependencies, or all referencing dependencies. So lots of different ways I could do that. And it will actually show you, if I right-click on it, and just hover the mouse over the color, it gives you kind of a preview ahead of time of what it's going to look like. So I don't have to select something and then tried it to go back and change it if it's not what I wanted. So just a way that you can mark the diagram for various reasons. If you're trying to mark, say, a particular path that you're following, or just certain objects that you want to highlight, you can do that here. These diagrams can also be saved. So you can basically export them as an image and save them. Just up at the top, you have the option to save surf image. And this gives you the option of changing or specifying the width and the height and what format. So if it's a bitmap, a JPEG, or a PNG. The surf itself can be saved. You can save it as a surf file, which if I were to do that, basically it's just going to save it as with the extension of SSD. And really all that's doing is just saving the databases that I had, or the database and the table that I had selected. So that way, if you ever need to come back to that surf and look at the schema again, you don't have to recreate it with all of your options. You can just open it right up out of a file. And you'll find that a lot of the features in DocXpress will let you do that. Especially some of the larger features that you'll see later on in BI Express, where you can build all of these different solutions, if you will, and projects, it will let you save all that to a file. I'll close out of the Schema Surf. And now we're going to look at the data surf. So we see how the schemas are related, but now I want to get an idea or a feel for how the data is related inside of the databases. If I click Data Surf, it'll ask me to connect to the server, choose the database again. And when I click Next, it asks for a table. So it wants me to start with a particular table. So I'm going to start with people.detail. Now also keep in mind, if you hover the mouse over the tables, it will give you a little preview here of all the different columns and their data types. If I click Next, I do have the option of adding some filtering criteria, which I really don't need in this case. I just want to know generally what's in these tables. So I'll click Finish, and it shows the representation of the table, how many rows are in that table, and then below that it shows all of the rows. So I'm actually viewing all the data that's in that database. And if you just left click on any one of these, it will show you over to the left parent tables and child tables. So in this case, it doesn't look like we have any parent tables, but there are two child tables here. And let's see, we can kind of discover what this person's record is tied to in other places of the database. So if I right click on this row, I have this menu now that I can search for child rows and parent rows. Of course, there's no parent tables, so that option for parent rows is grayed out. But I can look for child rows in the people.customer table or the people.staff table. So maybe I want to know more about this customer and maybe some of their details, or more about what members of the staff of this insurance company they've been working with. So I want to look at people.customer. So I'm going to select that. And of course, it does pull back one row. So we can see, looks like a customer key, a detail key, company key, and a last update. And from here, if I left click that one, then you will see two parent tables here and also the child tables. So I want to know, say I want to know more about how it's tied to the policy table. Maybe I could see what kind of policy this person has. So if I right click, and I'll choose the policy table now, looks like it found two rows that are attached to this customer. And looks like it's basically, at some point, this person has had two different policies here that's logged in this database. And it builds out the diagram. So you can see it keeps adding all of these tables to the diagram, much like what we saw inside of Schema Surf. But again, this one is just showing us how these tables are related by rows of data. So really handy to get an idea of how records are tied together, if you're just wanting to get a feel for the data that's there, or even if you're looking for a specific record somewhere in one of these tables, you can find that record, and then you can look at the actual rows that it's related to across the database. Now, just like with Schema Surf, you do have the option of exporting the image to whichever format you'd like, JPEG, bitmap, or PNG, and also saving the surf in a file. So if you ever have to come back to that, you can just load it right out of that file. You also, in this one, have some layout options. So you do have the option to change this into different designs, really, or different layout styles, like a grid or a circle view, or a spiral, however you want to do that. All right, so this was really just a demonstration of using DBA Express in the early stages of a project to kind of assess your environment. So in the next module, we're going to go ahead and take a look at DocXpress, its features, and how you would use that in your environment.